Can space speak? Over many decades with the development of technology, we've realized that yes, definitely. But what is it telling us that we still don't know? Recently, scientists detected a mysterious signal from an unknown source. That wouldn't be unusual. It's not the first signal like this. But what's interesting for us is that it's been sent to us for almost 30 years. It's just that scientists didn't know about it at first. So, what does this mysterious signal mean? Could it really be that representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization want to contact us? The history of radio signals from space began for us in 1937, when amateur astronomer Groyd Reber built the first radio telescope. This invention helped Reber create a map showing the radio structure of our galaxy, as well as find radio wave sources beyond the Milky Way. The scientist's work soon contributed to the discovery of non-thermal radiation. Now let's take a closer look at what radio waves actually are. Since radio waves belong to the electromagnetic spectrum, their propagation speed is equal to the speed of light. Scientists have created some projects to search for signs of extraterrestrial life in outer space. Radio signals help to detect such signs. One of the most famous projects is called Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and years of work have not been in vain. It should be said that during this time, we managed to catch several interesting radio signals. For example, in August 1977, a telescope with the interesting name Big Ear, belonging to the Perkins Observatory in Ohio, detected an unusual and powerful signal called WOW. The scientist Jerry Eman was analyzing the data received from the telescope, and in the process, he discovered a radio signal lasting 72 seconds. The signal was narrowband and quite strong. This signal could not be called ordinary in any way, so Eman marked it in his notes with red ink and wrote WOW next to it. That's how the name stuck to the radio signal. It's also interesting that the signal was within the hydrogen line. What is the hydrogen line? It's a type of wave that's formed by hydrogen in a gaseous state in space. And it's believed that signals whose frequency falls within this wave could come from extraterrestrial civilizations. That is, the hydrogen line can serve as a kind of communication channel. At the time the signal was discovered, scientists were unable to determine the nature of its origin. So 40 whole years passed, and then in 2017, the scientist Antonio Paris suggested that the signal was caused by the comets 266P Chrysanthemum and 335P Gibbs, which are surrounded by clouds of hydrogen gas. Not everyone agreed with this version, including Jerry Eman. The scientist said that the signal was detected only once and never repeated. If the radio signal had come from two comets, the Big Ear telescope would definitely have detected a split signal. However, this did not happen, which means the comets were not the cause. It's also important to note that Jerry Eman never claimed the signal came from extraterrestrial beings. There may be another explanation for this, but we don't have a definite answer yet. And perhaps we never will, as sad as that may sound. However, the story of strange signals doesn't end there. Here's another example, a signal that is literally driving astronomers crazy, and it's coming straight from the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way. In 2020, while analyzing data collected by the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder Telescope, scientists recorded about 2 million different objects emitting signals. Next, the scientists began identifying each type of object. They classified almost everything. There were even pulsars, but most turned out to be ordinary stars. However, it's not that simple. They received 6 signals over 9 months from one object at the Milky Way's center. The object's polarized radiation was unlike anything previously observed. The object puzzled not only scientists but also computers. No one could figure out what it was. To make matters worse, the discovery was neither in the infrared nor in the X-ray spectrum. And on top of all the strange features, the signal mysteriously disappeared. This happened even though 2 radio telescopes detected it simultaneously. The scientists grew even more confused when the signal was detected again a year later, only to mysteriously vanish as before. What kind of object could be emitting such a mysterious and strange radio signal? It's definitely not just some star or pulsar. There's a theory that this is a special type of signal called a galactic center radio transient, or galactic center radio transient for short. There are 3 other objects of this type. Even though it took a whole decade to discover them, astronomers still can't say for sure what they actually are. Of course, we can assume that the signal comes from an extraterrestrial civilization, and we just can't understand it due to a lack of data. However, it's important to remember that signals of artificial origin have a much narrower frequency range. There are also theories. The center of the galaxy are dying pulsars whose energy is already running out, and from time to time they emit radio bursts. Or they might be neutron stars rotating so they periodically block each other's signals. A new telescope called the Square Kilometre Array may help shed light on such a mysterious situation. It is expected to be completed by 2028 in Australia and South Africa. But what if we actually received a signal from an intelligent civilization? Recently, scientists noticed a mysterious object sending signals, and it's been sending these signals since 1988, and all this time we didn't know about it. The object is 15,000 light years away from Earth. Explosions of varying brightness come from this object, but they occur every 20 minutes. How accurate is it? Earlier, scientists suggested that the source of the radio signal is a neutron star, a magnetar. This is a star with the strongest magnetic fields in the universe. This is exactly why something similar to an earthquake sometimes happens on magnetars. Cracks form on the surface of the star, resulting in the release of a large amount of energy. All of this periodically triggers bursts of gamma and X-ray radiation, and this can be observed from our planet. By analyzing all the magnetars known to us, we determined that the interval of energy bursts ranges from a few seconds to several minutes. The discovered object has an interval of 22 minutes. It may be a special type of magnetar. Well then, is there a chance that we might receive a signal from an extraterrestrial civilization? Of course it's possible, but there are some things we shouldn't forget. The most important thing is the frequency range. Signals from extraterrestrial beings should be within the hydrogen line, which we mentioned earlier, and that's between the frequencies of 1,420 and 1,662 MHz. However, it may be that a hypothetical civilization is not able to communicate exactly at those frequencies. This should be taken into account. Another point is the strength of the signal. For us to detect it, it must be directed exactly at us. If that's not the case, then the signal must be very powerful. Here, we should take into account the inverse square law. Signals with a wide range weaken rapidly over long distances. And of course, time. In the end, everything comes down to it. A signal might appear too early for us, when our technology simply doesn't allow us to detect it. Earth signals don't travel far into the universe. Because of this, the chances that representatives of an alien civilization will catch them are extremely slim. It's not zero, but again, the speed of light is an obstacle. After all, as you remember, when we look at the starry sky, we're looking at the starry sky of the past. In the same way, if aliens see Earth, they'll see a version of it that existed millions of years ago. If they receive a radio signal, by the time they reach our planet, we will have long been gone. By the way, there is a project called Breakthrough Listen, whose main goal is to scan the sky for any signs of extraterrestrial presence. According to a recent study, some of the signals we've sent from Earth may have already reached distant stars, and perhaps somewhere out there is an extraterrestrial civilization that might send us a response signal. Scientists say that the situation will become clearer by 2029. And what do you think? Will we ever get an answer? And what will it be like? Will it mean a threat to us? Or will we be able to peacefully coexist with those who hear us through the silence of the boundless cosmos? The beginning of 2023 was marked by the discovery of a planet called LHS 475b by the James Webb Telescope, which is located 40 light-years away from Earth. This planet's unique feature is that its atmosphere closely resembles Earth's, according to initial studies. Initially, we thought this might be the most obvious candidate in the search for extraterrestrial life. However, to our disappointment, it soon turned out that the temperature on the surface of LHS 475b reaches 300 degrees and higher. Nothing alive can survive in such hellish conditions. That's a well-known fact, isn't it? But the specialists from the Laboratory of Agnostic Biosignatures, which is a division of National Aeronautics and Space Administration's astrobiology program in the United States, have a different opinion on this matter. We try to look for beings similar to ourselves, but life can take the strangest forms. Scientists claim that we still have only a vague idea of what extraterrestrial organisms are like and what kind of biochemistry they might have. It could be significantly different from the biochemistry of Earth organisms. So it's not really about the high temperatures. What if the problem is how we perceive extraterrestrial life, focusing on similarities and ignoring extraordinary possibilities? What kinds of living organisms could inhabit outer space? Remember which planets we usually search for signs of life on. These were planets located in habitable zones suitable for life. After all, these conditions allow liquid water to exist, which is vital for organisms' life processes. But what if by having such requirements, we're greatly narrowing the scope of our search? It is believed that complex forms of life cannot exist without carbon atoms. It can't be any other way. However, if you take a close look at the periodic table, you can find a few other similar elements. These are the so-called diatoms. They are very tiny, and at first glance, there is nothing special about them. However, what if I tell you that these are not just algae, but living stones? These are the only organisms on Earth whose cell walls are made not of carbon chains, but of silicon dioxide. Julius Scheiner, a 19th century German physicist, suggested that silicon, just like carbon, could serve as the basis for an organism. How would such organisms develop under Earth's conditions? In theory, silicon-based fungi could appear on our planet, which would more likely resemble stone. However, they wouldn't last long because they would simply suffocate. The thing is, under normal Earth conditions, silicon dioxide is just sand, while carbon dioxide is simply a gas. That is, organisms with carbon atoms can easily exist on our planet, but organisms with silicon atoms cannot. Accordingly, this means that they can carry out their life activities in an environment where there is no oxygen. One of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration scientists, Max Bernstein, suggested that organisms based on silicon atoms could be a system of intelligent crystals that can do without DNA molecules when transmitting data. In theory, such life forms could reach a level of intelligence that they would become a civilization. However, crystals grow and reproduce extremely slowly. Can we find similar organisms, but with a much higher rate of development? This planet is called Kelt 9b. It is 650 light years away from our planet. The temperature on its surface reaches over 4,300 degrees Celsius. That's extremely high, even higher than some celestial bodies. You have to agree, nothing alive could possibly survive in such a place, unless they are carbon-based organisms. But with silicon, the situation is different. Its melting point is 1,410 degrees Celsius. That means on Kelt 9b, it would simply turn into a liquid state, which could even accelerate the development of these organisms. Well, we've come to the conclusion that even on very hot planets, life can emerge. And what about icy worlds? What secrets do they hold? In that case, can we replace water with another substance that would also act as a solvent? A planet with a long and hard to pronounce name, Optical Gravitational Lensing Experiment, 2005, Bulge. No. If we don't look for it, we won't be able to find it. Based on methane as a solvent. Back then, almost 50 years ago, such ideas didn't have any concrete evidence. But nowadays, they finally have it. In 2015, scientists led by Paulette Clinzy from Johns Hopkins University confirmed that cells of organisms can form in a methane environment. It is assumed that the basis of the cell walls could be acrylonitrile, which is found in cold methane. Such cells are called azotosomes. The most interesting thing for us here is that such cells can connect with each other and form so-called spherical colonies. If an astronaut accidentally gets into such a sphere, he will instantly die from frostbite. Titan, Saturn's moon, one of the most mysterious bodies in the solar system. The reason for this is the dense orange haze that envelops the surface of the moon. It was only in 2005 that the Huygens probe was able to land there. As a result, we received images that truly shocked the scientific community. The surface of Titan was covered with rivers and lakes of liquid methane. On Titan, we can also observe cryovolcanic activity. Could living organisms be hiding on Titan? We have every reason to believe so. After all, in 2017, scientists from the observatory in the Atacama Desert announced that there is a huge amount of acrylonitrile on Titan, which could actually form the basis of cells in a methane environment. In 2011, the exoplanet Wide-Angle Search for Planets 39b was discovered, which is located at a distance. It attracted the attention of the scientific community because its atmosphere contains an enormous amount of hydrogen sulfide. And this could also serve as evidence of the presence of living organisms there. Professor Jack Holt of the University of California suggested that living organisms might not inhabit the surface of the exoplanet itself, but rather its interior, obtaining energy from the planet's core instead of from the star. And it is precisely hydrogen sulfide that could support the life activity of such organisms. These could be chemosynthetic species that would function normally beneath the surface in molten magma. What would such organisms look like? They would have something like large plates, which they could use to obtain energy from hydrogen sulfide. Most likely, such creatures would have something resembling a shell, and most likely, these organisms would be poisonous. So an encounter with them would inevitably end in death for a human. Add to that the high level of radiation on wide-angle search for planets 39b Key, and this is a world we will always avoid. We have some other theories about where extraterrestrial organisms might get their energy from. The British scientist Chris Impey suggested that some forms of life might be able to accumulate energy produced by radioactive decay. And under these conditions, the list of worlds where living organisms could potentially exist expands significantly. After all, radioactive reactions occur in many objects throughout the universe. For example, this neutron star is located 400 light-years away from our planet. This object is quite small, with a radius of about 10 kilometers, but it's heavier than the Sun. That's why the matter inside the star gets compressed and forms neutrons. Here, the nuclear interaction comes into play, which can create chains from neutrons to transmit information. This means that life could exist on a micro level. Processes inside a neutron star happen very quickly, which means entire civilizations could form there much faster, and this could happen in just a few hours. There are a lot of neutron stars in the universe, and it's quite possible that someday organisms from one star could come into contact with organisms from another. So, our tiny planet could become a grain of sand in a global alien communication system, and yet we may never be able to become a part of it. Well, sometimes it seems to us that some truths are impossible to refute, but that's not the case. And the possibility of the existence of such fantastic organisms clearly shouldn't be ignored. Carl Sagan once called Earth scientists carbon chauvinists. You shouldn't take offense, because all it means is that beings made of carbon and water are looking for cosmic neighbors with exactly the same composition. That could end up being a major misconception. American astronomer Victor Ours doesn't matter at all, and you and I know that the plots of science fiction books can very well become reality. And who knows, maybe our intelligent brothers will be beings whose appearance and structure will be completely different from anything we've ever known. Aliens and UFOs are something that have been on our minds for more than a century. How many science fiction novels have been written? How many movies have been made? How many works have been created on this topic? Our interest has never faded. But the main question remains, has anyone actually encountered extraterrestrial beings in real life? And are all these numerous unidentified flying object stories true? If you think that only ordinary people who easily believe in all sorts of fantastic things see UFOs, you are deeply mistaken. May 1957. For F-86D fighter pilot Milton Torres, it was an ordinary working day in Kent, England. Everything was going as usual, but suddenly Milton was ordered to eliminate a flying object of unknown origin. When the pilot was in the process of carrying out his mission, he noticed that this object was performing maneuvers that were impossible to execute according to the laws of physics. The object was turning around while actually staying in place, accelerating to high speeds, and then becoming motionless. When Milton got close enough to the object to attack it, it suddenly disappeared from the radar. The pilot returned to base without incident, but never understood what happened, what the object was, or why it vanished from radar. This happened at the height of the Cold War, so information about this mission was strictly classified. March 1990, Belgium. It was night. Objects of unknown origin appeared on the radars. This information could have remained hidden from the public, but the fact is that around 13,000 people saw the unidentified flying objects at that time. The most interesting thing is that 2,600 of them agreed to confirm this in writing. It's a serious matter, isn't it? The Belgian Air Force had no choice but to make it public. At 11 p.m., 3 unidentified luminous objects were spotted moving toward the city. The following features were noted The objects changed the color of their lights. They were sometimes red, sometimes green, sometimes yellow, and they also formed a triangle with another light in the center. About 10 minutes later, a second group of luminous objects was spotted heading toward the first group. After some time, the second group of lights also formed a triangle. Meanwhile, the command gave the order to scramble 2 fighter jets. They tried to get the coordinates to shoot down the target, but they couldn't do it. The group of lights kept changing its position without changing their positions relative to each other and was increasing speed. Moreover, the changes in speed were so abrupt that they would have had a fatal effect on a human. The fighter jets still tried to shoot down the target, and the smaller triangle disappeared. However, there was no confirmation that the target was actually hit. Soon, the second triangle disappeared as well. A similar glowing object was seen in 2007, this time in Russia. According to eyewitnesses, it could stay in one place and then suddenly move to another at high speeds, without making any sounds. According to the description, it was similar to what was seen in Belgium. July 1947. That day there was bad weather outside, heavy rain, and a thunderstorm. When it was all over, a local farmer named William Brazel went to the hill to make sure his sheep were all right. Besides, the man had previously heard strange sounds that sounded more like explosions than thunder. When William reached the spot, he saw fragments of some strange structure that looked very much like a spaceship. A little further on, the farmer saw strange spheres, inside which he could make out mysterious bodies that only vaguely resembled humans. William didn't waste any time. He immediately ran to tell the local sheriff about his discovery. He, in turn, reported it to the military from the nearby Roswell Air Base, who soon arrived at the scene. As expected, other local residents found out about this story, and soon the information reached the media. Newspapers and radio broadcasts discussed the unexpected discovery. Could it really have been aliens who tragically died because of the terrible weather? However, it was much more mundane. A few days later, the military who were studying the crash site stated that it was not a spaceship that had crashed, but just an ordinary weather balloon. Nevertheless, a lot of people rejected this version and stood their ground. Their area was visited by an unidentified flying object. Gradually, everyone forgot about this incident since no new details emerged. However, 30 years later, in the 1970s, the chief intelligence officer of the 509th Air Regiment, who served at the Roswell Air Base, Jesse Marson, gave an interview. In it, he claimed that the story about the weather balloon crash was not true. At that time, the military discovered fragments of an aircraft of unknown origin. At the crash site, they found rather unusual objects, such as lightweight but very strong materials, foil that couldn't be crumpled. After such bold statements by Marcel, local residents came forward as witnesses, claiming they saw the very moment the flying saucer crashed, and even the crew members themselves. Since then, people have returned to this story again and again, discussing it passionately over and over. But in 1994, the Maine Oversight Office of the United States Congress conducted an investigation into this case. Yes, it wasn't just a weather balloon, but it wasn't a flying saucer either. It turned out that during those years, there was an active project being developed that was supposed to monitor nuclear tests being conducted in the Soviet Union. Back in 1947, it was exactly this kind of device that crashed, which used rare materials and special canisters to detect radiation levels. The project was classified, so they couldn't reveal the truth then. So they came up with a story about a simple weather balloon crash. Well, it's certainly not aliens, but it's still quite an interesting case. Of course, scientists have tried to somehow systematize what ordinary people occasionally saw. That's why, in 1947, a project called Blue Book was launched. Its main goal was to systematically investigate all the unidentified flying object data that was coming in. The project was closed at the end of 1969. In total, scientists collected more than 12,000 cases of unidentified flying object activity. Of course, most of these stories turned out to be pure fiction. In the Soviet Union, both special agencies and ordinary citizens studied such cases. You can still find records of interesting cases in the archives. As mentioned, interest in unidentified flying objects remains strong today, even among scientists. Just a year ago, National Aeronautics and Space Administration announced that they are seriously studying anomalous activities of unknown origin. This is not surprising at all, since recently reports of strange objects have been coming from many countries. A lot of materials are classified, so it's still unclear whether there is, let's say, a conventional explanation for all these cases, or did it really happen on the planet? For example, former United States intelligence officer David Grush made a sensational statement that the government has allegedly already found evidence of unidentified flying object activity, but is hiding it from the public. According to him, during all this time, they managed to find not only fragments of flying vehicles, but also the remains of extraterrestrial beings themselves. David Grush also claimed that the United States has already launched special secret programs to search for alien ships on Earth. Grush's statement was supported by 2 other Pentagon employees, who also reported finding fragments of alien spacecraft. In addition to all this, interesting videos allegedly showing 2 declassified incidents have also appeared in the public domain. For example, this is a recent video from South Asia, and this one is from the Middle East last year. Of course, it could be much more boring. For example, after what happened with the aerostat in China, it was decided to eliminate all unidentified flying objects. As you can imagine, there were more and more reports about shooting down something unidentified, which started to stir people's minds once again. Let's look at the statistics. According to the United States Intelligence Agency, as of mid-2022, various departments had received more than 500 reports of unidentified flying objects. And that's a very large number. The number of reports has almost doubled. Yes, the topic of extraterrestrial life and UFOs just doesn't let people go, even though almost all cases can be explained or have been recognized as fakes. But just imagine for a second, what if all these unidentified objects in the sky, they're not aliens at all? What if it's the government developing secret projects? We were just observing and didn't make a national statement, which isn't enough. That's enough of us. National Aeronautics and Space Administration is the killer of Martian life. How do you like that statement? It sounds like something unreal, like another conspiracy theory. However, part of the scientific community believes in this version. Few people support it, but the key is that they exist. Such thoughts seem extremely illogical because National Aeronautics and Space Administration devices that work on other planets are specially treated so that they can't somehow disrupt extraterrestrial processes. National Aeronautics and Space Administration pays special attention to Mars because the idea that life once existed there, or still exists, has not left our minds to this day. But what if it was National Aeronautics and Space Administration that contributed to the disappearance of life on Mars? And how did they do it? We don't have any evidence yet that there were or are living organisms on Mars. What if we once discovered these signs, but couldn't recognize them for what they were, and just ignored them as if they were trash? Let's go back in time. In 1975, National Aeronautics and Space Administration launched the Viking space program to study Mars. The Viking 1 and Viking 2 spacecraft were the first to land on the Red Planet and gave us. The Viking mission spacecraft had special instruments that were supposed to detect possible living organisms. There, the Vikings remained the only spacecraft to have had such a wide arsenal. And here's the most interesting part. 2 experiments detected signs of metabolism in some samples of Martian soil. Other experiments also found signs of metabolism, but during the experiments, they did not find any traces of organics. Importantly, the Vikings found a small amount of chlorine, but at the time, this wasn't given much significance because astronomers thought it was residue from the material used to treat the spacecraft. Overall, The Viking mission did not find any signs of life on the red planet. At least that's what the scientists concluded. However, opinions on this issue differed. The main criticisms focused on how the experiment was conducted. Let's take a closer look at how the experiment to detect metabolism was conducted. Soil samples from the red planet were placed in a special solution with the radioactive isotope carbon-14. If there were any microorganisms in the soil, a metabolic reaction would occur. Before the mission began, this method was tested using soil from different parts of the Earth, and in all cases, the experiment showed the presence of microorganisms. To make sure the experiment would be accurate, they tested soil samples from the moon. As expected, the result here was negative, showing no errors. On Mars, however, it was positive. What's most interesting is that two separate probes in different locations produced this result simultaneously. At first, there was a theory that this result was obtained because the soil samples were affected by ultraviolet rays. The scientists took samples unexposed to ultraviolet rays, and again the result was positive. Heating the samples to 160 degrees produced a negative result. Metabolism weakened significantly when the temperature reached 50 degrees. When the samples were placed for a long time in an environment with a temperature of 10 degrees, the result became completely negative. In the end, scientists concluded that there is no life on Mars after all, and that there is another explanation for such curious experimental results. However, there are still supporters of the theory that back then Viking 1 and Viking 2 really did manage to detect signs of life, and that scientists simply misinterpreted the results. As we mentioned earlier, no organic compounds were found during the experiments. There are several explanations for why this happened. The first and most obvious is that there simply aren't any organics there. The second is that the experiment for detecting organic compounds was not perfect, and therefore the results it provided were distorted. The third explanation is that organic matter was simply not detected because it was destroyed during the heating of the soil samples. And some scientists believe that water was actually to blame, since none of the experiments were conducted without it. The point is that supposedly water should not have been added. It's possible that microorganisms on Mars have adapted to life without water. If you start watering them, they will simply die, unable to quickly adapt to the new living conditions. It's somewhat similar to organisms found in Earth's deserts that extract some moisture directly from the air. However, there hasn't been any comprehensive scientific work written on this issue, so the opinion of most scientists hasn't changed. But they're called National Aeronautics and Space Administration's killers, not because they methodically destroyed life on Mars like maniacs, but because they overlooked it or accidentally eliminated it in the very sample they were analyzing. This whole story tells us that we need to organize new missions to Mars in order to finally get to the truth, especially since Mars continues to be the center of everyone's interest. The red planet still hides many secrets, and the desire to uncover them is only fueled by specialists from National Aeronautics and Space Administration. In September 2023, the Space Agency released a new audio recording from Mars. This time, it's the sounds made by Mars Oxygen in situ resource utilization experiment, a special device installed on the Perseverance rover. We are making incredible efforts to find signs of extraterrestrial life, even in its most primitive form. But what if that extraterrestrial life has already come to us? For example, in September of this year, alien bodies were brought directly into the Mexican parliament. Actually, Mexico is more progressive on this issue. They are already discussing this at the official level. It all started with the journalist Jaime Maussan, who is also a staunch believer in their existence. and he claimed that the discovered mummy remains are representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization that came to Earth more than 1,000 years ago. At the parliamentary hearing, they brought in 2 bodies supposedly of aliens, and to make it more convincing, they also presented video footage of unexplained anomalous phenomena. The aliens themselves were small in size, had elongated heads and 3 fingers on each hand. According to Jaime Maussan, the bodies were found near the ancient Nazca lines in the southern part of Peru. How did National Aeronautics and Space Administration react to this? Scientists requested the bodies for research to find out the truth for sure. Both David Spergel, who once led an independent National Aeronautics and Space Administration investigation regarding UFOs, and Dan Evans, Assistant Deputy Administrator at National Aeronautics and Space Administration, spoke about this. Meanwhile, Maussan still hasn't provided the bodies. If we look deeper into Jaime Maussan's biography, we'll find that he already once claimed to have discovered alien remains in Peru. That was in 2017. However, it turned out that they were just dolls. And now, once again, there are alien remains, but this time in the Mexican parliament. Julieta Fierro, a researcher at the Institute of Astronomy of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, was one of the most ardent skeptics in this case. Here's what she told journalists. Maussan says that he spoke with the Virgin of Guadalupe. He told me that aliens don't talk to me the way they talk to him because I don't believe in them. Well, this man is clearly eccentric, but maybe he's actually telling the truth? There are a lot of strange things in this story, like how the remains were so easily taken out of Peru, where they were supposedly discovered. Since these are such valuable objects that could change our understanding of history and science. Most interestingly, at the presentation, I was in Kiev. The evidence included radiocarbon analysis results which reportedly showed the object's great age. Moreover, the laboratory itself says that they never saw the aliens' bodies and only conducted research on a small sample. And again, we can't speak about the accuracy of the results because in theory, the biology of aliens is different from ours, which is quite logical. In the end, it turns out that this case is just another fantasy of Maussan, which simply managed to reach such a high level. So we still haven't found any signs of life on other planets, just as extraterrestrial life has never come to our Earth. However, science is moving forward by leaps and bounds, and who knows, maybe someday we will actually receive news about alien organisms in some galaxy. The starry sky, like a magnet, captivated our ancestors thousands of years ago. Early prototypes of star maps showing planets and celestial bodies appear on ancient cave walls. Then, cave paintings were replaced by books, which now tell us about people's understanding of the cosmos at that time. As our understanding of the structure of the universe became more advanced and technology developed by leaps and bounds, we began to discover more and more new worlds in the solar system. For example, we learned about a considerable number of moons of Jupiter and Saturn, about fairly large planets, and about real icy worlds. And do you know about the hypothetical minor planet called Vulcan? At the beginning of the 19th century, there was a theory that this planet was the closest to the Sun. However, it was later discovered that Vulcan does not actually exist. Some scientists claim to have seen it through a telescope, but most likely these were just sunspots. In 1980, it was... They found out that there was nothing. They found out that nothing was discovered. Let's also remember the hypothetical planet Phaethon, which is supposed to be somewhere between Mars and Jupiter. Let's focus on it in more detail. Why has this object attracted so much interest from scientists, and what are the chances that Phaethon actually exists? For a long time, there was something like stagnation in space science, since no new planets were being discovered. However, everything changed in 1781 when William Herschel discovered Uranus, which became the first planet to be discovered in hundreds of years. Other scientists decided not to fall behind and also tried to find a new planet, but this turned out to be very, very difficult. Then the Titius-Bode law came to the rescue, which was supposed to help determine in which part of the solar system a planet might be hiding. According to this law, it is possible. It is possible. It is possible. It is possible. It is possible at once. In the winter of 1801, the Italian scientist Giuseppe Piazzi, while observing the night sky, came across an unknown point that was slowly moving among the stars. At first, the astronomer concluded that this point was a comet. He even managed to give it a name, Ceres. However, it was later discovered that it almost perfectly fit the Titius-Bode law, Ceres. It was smaller than nearby planets, but this didn't contradict the theory. At that time, the scientific community was genuinely euphoric. The newly discovered planet received a planetary symbol. It seemed that all the blanks had been filled, but in reality, things were not that simple. Just a year later, in 1802, another similar object was discovered called Pallas. In 1804, Juno, and in 1807, Vesta. All these objects fit the Titius-Bode law and moved along the same orbit as Ceres. Then some astronomers came up with the idea that perhaps they had discovered 4 objects of an entirely new class. For a long time, people thought there were 11 planets in the solar system: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Vesta, Juno, Ceres, Pallas, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. Neptune was discovered in 1807 and 1846, and it actually contradicted the Titius-Bode law because its distance from the Sun was 8 astronomical units less than what the formula predicted. Then the scientific community concluded that the Titius-Bode law was irrelevant for the solar system and was nothing more than a coincidence. By 1860, the 4 discovered objects that were recently considered planets were renamed asteroids, and the planet of the solar system where they were located was called the asteroid belt. Well, the vanished planet turned out to be untrue, although it was a very fascinating story from the perspective of both ordinary people and scientists. However, we still have questions. For example, where did this asteroid belt come from? Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers put forward the theory that all these asteroids are actually fragments of a planet that once did exist. They named the planet Phaethon after the son of the sun god Helios, who rode his chariot across the sky every day. According to the myths, Phaethon's chariot burned up when it came too close to the Earth. Well, the fate of Phaethon and the hypothetical planet is somewhat similar. Olbers suggested that the planet Phaethon was located right in the region where we are, in the region where we are, in the region we are in the region where we are in the region somewhere, anywhere. And so instantly the hypothetical star, Nemesis. So is it true that there was a world that was destroyed long ago, but left traces behind in the solar system? Asteroids. We wouldn't want to disappoint you, but that's unlikely. The thing is, research has shown that the total mass of all the objects discovered in the asteroid belt is only about 4% of the mass of the moon. That's catastrophically little to form a planet. So where did the asteroid belt come from in the first place? It's now believed that it's what's left over from the formation of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. It's what's left from the accretion disk, a disk of dust and gas that once surrounded the sun. It was from the fragments of the accretion disk that asteroids, comets, and planets with their moons were formed. Thanks to this disk, we know the solar system as it is now. Asteroids can help us learn what the solar system was like in the distant past. You could say that asteroids are a kind of time machine. And what if the mysterious planet Phaethon really existed? What would it have been like? As we already mentioned, it would have been located between Mars and Jupiter and would have been the smallest planet in the solar system. Most likely, the hypothetical planet was with a rocky surface, a very thin atmosphere, and no magnetic field, which means there would be no protection from particles carried by the solar wind. Yes, the mysterious planet Phaethon never existed, but it left a significant mark in history. And of course, in some way, it inspired filmmakers and science fiction writers to create works about space. And what do you think? Will we ever find such mysteries? A mysterious world?